Okay, well, first of all, thank you for participating. We have a few questions regarding ethics. First of all, we would like to know your definition of ethics. How would you describe ethics?
Wow, gosh. My inclination is to say doing the right thing, but of course that's a judgment call, because what is the right thing? So I think I'm sure that you can come up with a better definition academically of what ethics would stand for. But to me, it's doing the right thing within the parameters of, I think, what we've agreed as society, in which we as humans, as individuals, but also as other actors, whether it's an organization or a company, should behave. And I think the interesting thing, and I'm making a side track, I think, is that there's always room for interpretation. And I mean, that's the hard part. We'll all remember those areas where the bankers with their bonuses and doing the wrong thing, and also traders trading with inside knowledge, etc. I think we all know that it's not ethical behavior. And then sometimes they get away with it because they play with the boundaries. And I think at the end of the day, internally people know what is ethical, i.e. what is right or wrong. And only those that do not, they are the exceptions in society, and they're psychopaths.
Yeah.
So I actually do think we can rely on our gut to know what's right or wrong. But I think we need the rules. So I've described the story to you, but I don't think I've given you a definition of ethics.
No, but it's fine. Yeah, we really want to know your view on this, because if we want to have the academical explanation, we could search it up.
Yeah,
we want
perfect.
To know.
And then let me know, please.
Yes, of course.
I'll Google it afterwards.
The second question is, in our ebook, we also explained the relationship between employees and the company itself. And like the employees can be a sort of ambassador. They are the face towards the society. And during our lecture you discussed the 3 A's. Can you explain that here a bit more?
Sure. So the 3 A's that I again and again believe I feel very strongly about, and it's something that grew upon me over the years of working in communication, will provide much more meaningful and purposeful communications, I believe. So it starts with authenticity. Don't portray yourself to something that you're not. So if you're Shell, be honest about the fact that you're in the business of oil and gas. If you're Nike, then be honest about the fact that you produce your gear, but be also honest about the fact that you might produce it in countries where there's, things that we don't really want to know. But it's authentic. You can't play around with it, don't spin. And if you go for authentic, then some of the wrong elements that have gone into communications, like spinning indeed, will disappear, because you can no longer spin. If you're a bank, you give big bonuses. Don't try and hide behind anything. Be honest about it. Because if you stick to authenticity, and it's not right, then you'll be forced to start doing the right thing, because your other stakeholders will push you. So I think authenticity is the starting point. Then the second A is audiences. You can also call them stakeholders. To which I think I might have mentioned that, first of all, I think it's important in everything you do that there's a red theme, that you differentiate what you do and the way you communicate per audience. And I challenge everybody to do communication plans, to add 2 additional audiences to any communication plan, namely Mother Earth and future generations. Because if you do that, then no communication plan will be the same, and no business plan will be the same anymore. And yes, it challenges the business strategy, which I think is the exact right thing to do. Because, am I being loud enough? Okay.
Yeah.
Then you're forced to do the right thing, and then the planetary boundaries are being accepted, and the fact that there's people that come after us are accepted too. But in order to do that, you need to be audacious. So you need 3 A's in order to really do this. You need to be daring and be brave. So I believe if we can adhere to the 3 A's, it makes our profession very different.
Thank you. And the next question is about L'Oreal, because they often use endorsers and other persuasive factors within their communication towards their stakeholders and towards their consumers. What is your vision on persuasive communication? Do you think that it's the right thing to do or a wrong thing?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question. Well, it's an easy and a difficult question. Because what about if we do persuasive communications for the right cause? And I've had this discussion at a conference where we talked about bad advertising versus good advertising. So yeah, persuasive communications. I mean, we all know in the areas where we need to do the right thing, whether it's education for all, or the human right to water and sanitation. It's World Water Toilet Today, or World Toilet Day. It is today, because the raping, the girls raped in India is often to do with the fact that they don't have any access to toilets. So what about persuasive communications on that to start to do the right thing? Would we say that therefore it's right? I don't know. So I find it a very hard question. And I think it goes back to the way I would probably look at it is through the eyes of Jonah Sachs that I talked about, the methodology of story wars. What is the broken world that we look at? So I think the broken world of girls not having access to water and sanitation, I think everybody would agree ethically that that is a broken world. Going back to L'Oreal or to any other, is that really a broken world? What they're telling me is that in order for me to stay young, I need to buy their products. And then they have these beautiful old women that don't look old at all. So they show me a broken world that I didn't realize was broken actually. Can't I age? And can't I age nicely? Isn't that part of humanity? And isn't that beautiful? So why don't we do that? So maybe the way of looking at, is there actually something that is broken and does it need to be healed, would allow me to articulate whether I think persuasive communication is all right or not.
Yes. So if I understand it in the right way, persuasive communication is correct if it has a higher goal. Like if it helps like a real broken world, as you explained, and not a broken world which is not really broken, but they want to believe their customers that it is broken, so they buy their product.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's about, is it about, from a company's perspective, is it stakeholder value or is it shareholder value? And this is just making more money from something that I didn't realize that I couldn't wrinkle.
We also discussed in our ebook the privacy war. And that has to do with companies using data of consumers. And again, there's like the higher goal to make a better customer experience, but still they use data without asking permission. What is your view on regarding ethics on this?
It's a similar thing. I used to be quite black and white and say there's a no-go. And I've had discussions with my brother, who was in IT, and who has enabled me the fact that I have a personal email address which is inge@wallage.nl, but it's based on Google Mail. And he is restricted to all because he doesn't want anybody to see anything. So I can't use Google Docs as connected to my email. And I want to use Google Docs because I'm like, sod it. If they want to find out about me, they can find about me anyway, so I want to use it. I think there's other ways to find out. So for me there's a lot of area of grey in this one. I'm quite impressed with Facebook recently promoting something to me that I was interested in. I'm like, it was a bit spooky. And from an organizational perspective, we are starting to want to do the same. So we organize events on climate and energy and water, on all sorts of things. So people register for an event, and what we want to do is we want to share them, that we have journals and books on the same, which to us is a customer service. But how do we know in the first place that that's something that they're interested in? So I think by keep on asking yourself critical questions of the right or the wrong, I think you could probably go quite a bit further. And then you get into the area where, of course, there will be ruthless operators that you can mostly find in the more profit part of the world than the non-profit part of the world. And then this is only yet an example of maybe quite a number of things that might not be right in that world. So this is just one example, I'd say.
Yes. So again, the higher goal is actually dominating the use of big data.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are discussing the corporate social responsibility, and if we can make a sort of how do you say, sort of state for you, and you can agree with it or not. So corporate social responsibility is a good mechanism for companies to have a positive impact on the environment and their stakeholders like consumers. But what if corporate social responsibility backfires when the company isn't doing what they say they are doing? For example, L'Oreal, which is saying we're not testing on animals anymore, but they actually still do it. How do you, what is your view on that?
Of course, that's clearly wrong, and that's why I believe in authenticity.
Okay.
So they're just not being authentic. So it's very easy. For me, it's a very easy one. The CSR, I think, is a good approach.
Yeah.
Because in principle it helps, I think, a company to start to do the right thing. But again, in the hands of ruthless operators, it's become a tool for them to try and portray one thing and do the other. And unfortunately, in today's digitally connected world, people can find out and can straight away expose it and show that it's not authentic.
Yes. So, what if you would work for L'Oreal? Would you then choose for being authentic and saying, yes, we do use animal tests, or we
Totally.
do...
I always believe in the truth.
Okay.
In truth and transparency. Yeah. Because I think at the end of the day, it'll come back to you.
And within IWA, do you think you're really transparent towards your stakeholders?
I don't think we're transparent enough yet. And we've had discussions like that in the management team. For profit companies, there is all sorts of guidelines in the way you need to show all your operations. The same has started to happen in the not-profit world. There's a global reporting initiative, the GRI it's called, and it sets all sorts of standards of transparency. We are a very small organization that is professionalizing, and we have not yet got to the stage where we have developed all the mechanisms in place to do that, but we're on the journey to do so. And we've really talked about it, and we've had discussions about what do we proactively promote, what not, what is something that you reactively will give, and what is something that you need to abide by. And so for our plan for next year, it's one of the things that we want to look into, that we are starting to improve that area. And then towards our own people, I think we can view everything. And I know that there's been discussions between our staff of the so-called high salaries that management is on. And there's been big discussions among staff. And when that happens, I'm always the first to say, okay, we just need to sit down and talk about it. Because again, you just need to, just like I gave the diving example, if you can explain it, then explain it. And if you can't explain it, well, maybe you need to go back and think about what it is that we're doing.
Still, again, your gut telling you if you're right or wrong. Right? If you can explain it, then you know that you're right. If you can't, you know that.
Which is a dangerous thing, I realize. Because I know from filing that my gut is uber high. So I know that I can rely on it. I've learned also to rely on it. Whereas when I was younger and just entered the workplace and it was very cognitive, I pushed my gut away. Whereas during the course of the years, I've learned that that's a strength of mine and I can actually rely on it. And then in teams where you do different psychological profiling, you can help each other. Then on the different strengths, you become stronger together. So people know that they can rely on me with my gut. But therefore, if you don't have such a high intuitive streak, you also need to make sure that you can make the right judgment calls. So I realize it's a dangerous thing that I say. So I think that's why diverse teams are very important, where together you debate what is that higher goal and how do you view on it, how do you look at it. But you still need to set whatever guidelines and parameters that fit you as an organization or that fit you as a company, I think. Because that will build on gut, but that will also make it a bit more cognitive, if you like. So you work on both areas, which I think is right. And that's the same with that. I mean, there's certain things you just don't want to know. And I was intrigued with how far May let herself go, both with regards to her parents, as well as with regards to her ex-boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me was in the area of, can't believe it must have felt right to her. So if she would have, that's why I think mindfulness is the right thing. If she would have sat down and really done some reflections, I can't believe that she would have made those choices. So the treadmill of some of the, even if it's good cause, actually this is an interesting one. I think the treadmill of the way we work, or some people work, whether it's in profit or non-profit, if you keep on working, you never stand still to reflect, you lose your judgment call, I think. You lose your opportunity to say, is this right or is this wrong? Or ask other people to challenge yourself, because you just go on that automatic pilot. I think that's what she was on. So she couldn't do that anymore. Because I mean, I was surprised she didn't agree with Calvin to go into the other direction. I was really struck.
Yes. Maybe she was too far already.
Yeah.
She lost track.
And not enough in love.
Yeah, sad. Not a Roman. But what is your view on transparency within employee? Like, do you think that screening, there are Facebook pages or social network accounts, do you think that that is something which is mandatory, which is not? Not?
It is very interesting because, as you can imagine, I grew up with it all being developed, and I worked for Motorola from 94 to 2001, and there was a high-tech company, and they were the biggest at the time with mobile telephony and very advanced, and so it was wonderful to be in that work environment, and both within the company but also working with other technology companies, we had these whole discussions whether our people should be monitored, how much time they would spend on. And then I went to Philips, and then it was the same in Statoil. I mean, oil companies are far worse in that area. It's very interesting actually. In terms of transparency and access, there's a world of difference between the technology company that I worked for versus the oil company that I worked for. And I think I've always felt, it's my gut again, I've always felt that it's just not right. People have their own individual freedom. And for them to want to do whatever it takes for the company they work for, the organization they work for, is because you make it appealing to them. It's a mutual relationship, right? It's not something that you can force upon someone. So what is your employee value proposition, if you like, as an employer to the employee? And that's why they want to do the right thing. So if I see people on Facebook, do your thing, I can only trust that you do it in the right way. And there's plenty of metrics to find out and have conversations with your people whether they are contributing to fulfilling their role, and their role hopefully is connected to what we're trying to do as a company and as an organization.
And our final question is, what is your best advice to the PR manager of the future to be and stay ethical within the fast changing network society?
Be mindful. Now, if I may say it in one thing, it's be mindful. And I trust with the things I talked about, you could argue that's the Uber decision. I think, as I mentioned in the lecture as well, and therefore I think it is be mindful, because I think the PR manager, I think the profession has got to a stage where the education is at a very good level. I think you all get very good education. Then there is professional organizations that you can remain a member of. I think that's the other advice I would say, is don't get siloed within the organization or the company that you work for. Make sure you keep on having contact with peers who work elsewhere. And if you can get professionally connected, that's a very wise thing to do, because you can get on sharing best practice and challenge each other, so you continue to grow and will never go stale. And then the ultimate other thing, it is be mindful, because make sure that you will stand still and reflect, am I continuing on the path that I wanted to go on? Because ultimately that's where stress comes from, that you're no longer doing what you thought you wanted to do, and at some point it'll just come out.
Yes. So during this interview I noticed that for you the values of trust yourself, your inner gut, and also to stay true to yourself. And the last question, you mentioned that you should not lose yourself within a company. For example, if we mention the circle, that may lost herself. So if you stay yourself, keep listening to yourself, and sometimes step back and ask yourself the questions: am I still doing the right thing according to my own values? That will be the most important to maintain as a PR manager.
Well, it's good you play it back, because now I'm triggered. I think people who do PR, counter to marketing, by the way, because I think there's a difference there, although ethical marketing is closer to PR, I think. But from PR, we really learn that there's the identity and there's the image, and if there's a discrepancy, it doesn't work well. Whereas in marketing, I think it's about the image, and you'll do whatever it takes to cross that discrepancy. So people therefore who choose PR, I think, are more on an intrinsical path than on an extrinsic path. They're more led by wanting to do the right thing. So the fact that you asked me the question with regards to the PR manager, I stand by the answer. However, if you would have asked the same question with regards to someone going into accountancy, or someone going into banking or marketing, I'd probably answer in a different way, because I think they need more challenge.
And can you explain it further?
Yeah, because I think they are driven by different values themselves. So if they, and maybe that's right for them, huh? I mean, that's also one thing. If you just
so, can I say that according to you, you have to sort of adapt yourself to the company or the sector you work in? Because if you are a banker, but which is driven by his own gut and by the feeling that he need to how do you say it? That he wants to contribute to a Uber goal, then you won't survive within that world, because others are hard and they lost their gut. So you have to adapt yourself to the sector you're working.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, this is an interesting one, because I was brought up very atheist for multiple reasons, and I 1.5 years ago read a book by Alain de Botton called Religion for Atheists, and that in this secular society we have lost touch with that Uber goal. And for me, I can't call that, whatever it is, God. This doesn't work for me. It's not the way I was brought up. But there's something that we can learn from religion, who got it really right, where they connect people on greater good. So if that person, because if you're on the values and you've got your big bonus and you can spend the money wherever you want to, and you go on onto the airport and you spend whatever. If there, because society has agreed to promote different things, if you're not just triggered on that path, but you're triggered on different values, then I think it would help that person to stay on that path. And I think that's where, I guess, secular society is being challenged, but also very specific religious societies are challenged in their own particular ways. That what is it that together would bring us together and leads us to want to continue to do the right thing? So rather than go to L'Oreal and buy your cream, you see a meditation place at the airport, and you just go and sit down and feel comfortable. And in fact, at Schiphol, you've got areas now where supposedly with nature, I mean, we heard ducks when we were sitting there the other day. There's no ducks, it's just sound of ducks, but it puts you in a different frame of mind. And if that's sufficiently offered to people who are on a particular treadmill, they get different impulses ongoing, and I think there's signs of that sufficiently. I mean, if you think about the banking sector again, if you go to the cinema and you see the trailers of banks, there's particular banks who have very different advertising, who are playing far more to stakeholder perspective and to societal norms than necessarily just on the other path. So I think I see positive signs that is happening.